Okay, following on from the problems with this Vanda, in this video I'm going to have an attempt at least starting some form of treatment to see if it'll work. As I said, I've sort of excluded a viral infection because of the look of the discoloration is too regular. But whatever it is, I'm going to try and treat it first. Obviously that's my Vanda bucket with my feed in, and first job is to warm that up. I'm not putting plants in that when it's freezing cold, because that doesn't do them any good either. And while I'm at it, whatever I do to the Vanda, I'm going to do to my Rhynchostylus giganteas, because they have very pale leaves. Now I think I've been keeping that too light. So it's been in a light that's too bright. Information on this plant variable. Some say keep it in really good light, and others say by keeping it in good light your leaves will turn pale, but you'll probably get more bloom spikes. And others say it shouldn't get high light and the leaves should be a nice even green. If you keep it in not enough light, the leaves will go quite dark coloured. But this one's also got a problem, even though it hasn't long bloomed. It's desiccating. It's not a happy plant. So whatever I do to the Vanda, I'm going to do to that as well. This also gets soaked in the same bucket. So they have that in common. Right, start point. That's some of the water out of the Vanda bucket, and that pH meter settled down incredibly quickly around 6.7, 6.8. Well, there's problem number one. That's far too high. Yeah? So that's an area of concern which I'm now going to deal with. And the way I'm going to deal with it is odd. But it's what I'm going to do. You don't have to agree, but I've got to try and do something. Or chuck the plant out. That's always a bottom line choice. Discard the plant. But anyway, I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, first of all, set the sort of ground rules. Chlorosis, done some work on that, and the main cause of that, yellowing leaves, weak growth, the various symptoms, basically yellowing leaves, is mainly, not entirely, due to both magnesium and iron deficiencies. One or both of those two are the main reasons. But combined with that is their lack of availability to the plant by being in an environment that is too alkaline. In other words, the pH is too high for those to be absorbed and used properly. So that's my sort of starting point to the logic of what I'm going to do. Yeah, the pH of my Vanda water is currently 7.8. That's outside of our range and way too high for iron to be absorbed properly. And magnesium possibly is okay at that sort of pH, but our recommended pH for our orchids is somewhere between, well, they say 5.5 to 6.5, but basically lower than 6.5, not 6.7, 6.8. Okay, so that's my sort of start point. Right, this is where a third hand would become really useful. So I'm filming with the camera in my left hand, so it's not going to be as steady as it might be because I'm right-handed. So my water's warmed up. That's just a matter of hot water out of the tap in some bottles, drop them in there and they raise the temperature of the water, which we've now done. I just use my hand to feel that. If it feels comfortable, then yeah, that's fine. I wouldn't want to sit in it, but right, so the next thing to do is check my TDS reading on this water as it is now. That's currently sitting about 190-ish, which is a reasonable level of feed for Vandas. Some would say it's half as strong as it needs to be. Some people feed Vandas at much higher levels than that. But yeah, it's around the 190 mark. Now I need to know my start point because of what I'm going to do next. So that's my starting point for my TDS reading. A general view of what's in the water now. Now we're going to start adding stuff. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is add some CalMag to this. Basically this has got chelated iron in it. It's not going to fix any magnesium related problems. I haven't got a clue how much of this I'm going to need. So I'm not used to putting this in the Vanda bucket, quite honestly. Maybe I should. And under normal circumstances I would not mix supplements with a fertiliser. But I haven't got time to change the water in here and start from scratch, so I'm adding it, which is why I wanted to know my TDS level when I started. And all I want to do is raise that TDS from where it started by about 80-ish points by adding the CalMag. Where's my TDS meter gone? I doubt if that's done hardly anything because I didn't put much in. But I don't want to overcook it. Right, we've gone up to 224. So nowhere near enough yet. So we'll add a bit more. As I say, I don't want to put too much in and have to add water to water it down. So I'm doing it a sort of bit at a time. I've got stacks of this stuff, a whole flipping jar full, so it's not like it's going to go to waste. Right, where are we now? Come on. Right, we're up to 235, so 230. So that's taken it up 40 points. So effectively I need twice as much. I'll be back when I've got this where I want it. Okay, that's got my TDS reading up to about 275. Well, given that we started at 190, that's raised the TDS by 85. I was after somewhere between 80 and 90. That's good enough. So that's got an amount of CalMag in there that I would normally use if I was feeding my orchids, albeit on its own. Yeah? As I say, this is a bit hit and miss, but what I need to know now is what the hell that's done to my pH, if anything. With my not very reliable pH meter. Well, it hasn't altered it that much, quite honestly. It's gone from, it was reading 6.8 consistently in that little glass of water. It's now reading 6.7. Right, now we'll deal with that. Using up my battery all the time. I'll be back. Right, this is going to be a right cocktail in here, isn't it? The pH is currently 6.7. I want to go down to about 6. And quite honestly, I haven't got a clue how much citric acid I'm going to need in this volume of water. So I'm just going to put, I don't want to put too much in because I can't take it out. We'll put a metric sploop in and we'll give it a good stir around and see what that has done to the pH. Should have lowered it some, but I don't know by how much. Once I see how much it dropped with that amount, if I need loads more I can put loads more in. If I just need a touch more I can deal with it. I need to get this down to 6 or a bit below perhaps. Well, that amount's taken it down to 6.6, so it hasn't altered it much at all, has it? Right, let's give it a good dose then, see what that does. As I say, this is a very weak solution of citric acid. Let's get on with it. As I say, iron deficiency is often caused by alkaline conditions. In other words, pH is too high. And iron, along with the magnesium and some other bits and pieces, is what gives us our chlorophyll, basically. So, right, what's that done then? 'Cause that was quite a large amount now. Still only taking it down to 6.5. Ah, right, let's give it another whack then. Quite a bit. This is a large volume of water. When I'm playing around for watering my normal orchids, I'm working with much smaller volumes of water. So amounts needed to get changes are much smaller, basically. Make sure this really is mixed in. Get a true reading. Alright, what's that done then? Be here all day. Getting there, that's down to 6.3 now. 6.2, 6.3. I reckon another big capful should get me down to somewhere near it. And this is blatantly obvious now. The amount of the citric acid that I've been adding to this bucket, as a guess, was about half a capful. We're already on 3 capfuls, so obviously anything that's been going in this bucket has been using quite an alkaline water. And the consequences are some nutrients are not getting in there. I wish this pH meter was like my TDS meter and gave me an instant reading rather than having to waggle, waggle, waggle all the time. Because it uses up time. Excellent. 5.9. That's what I wanted. Right, turn that off, save me battery. Put it somewhere where I'm not going to knock it over. So basically we've now reduced the alkalinity quite a bit. Come down from 6.8 down to 5.9. Yeah? And although my MSU fertiliser has already got iron and magnesium in it, the iron probably was not available. Well, now it is. And there's excess iron in there in a chelated form. Now we can dunk the plant. Leave it to have a good soak. And I'm also, once that's fully hydrated at the root level, I'm going to do something I wouldn't normally do, and I'm actually going to pour water, that water, all over that plant and get it absolutely soaking wet, so that there's a form of foliar feed as well as hydration and feed going in at the roots. And that's the best I can do. And obviously results are not going to be instant. It might take weeks, I don't know. But I'm now happy that what's in that bucket is going to correct any iron deficiency and give it a bit of a kick while it's at it. So that's that. So far, so good. Another little snippet of information from a viewer. Thank you very much. I was actually starting to think about looking that up at the point the comment arrived, and it sort of triggered me to make sure I do it. But the previous video was looking at the components listed in the MSU fertiliser. Well, my lack of chemistry type knowledge is extensive. And what I hadn't appreciated is that in that small print, quite a lot of the elements used to construct those component elements that are listed are sulfates. So they do contain sulfur. So my idea that sulfur is completely missing is probably wrong, but it was only an idea and a thought. You know, I hadn't specifically said that. I said I was still looking into it. So I think the sulfur issue can just be disregarded, which are good, because that would have been a worry. So I think we're okay there. So we'll carry on with what I was doing. Nothing changes as a consequence of that. It just takes one worry away from me, which is good. Got enough at the moment. Okay, so far the Vanda's had a very long soak. Weighed down because it's in a wooden basket. It tries to float and doesn't get all the roots wet, so I hold it down under the water. I've poured water over the plant quite a few times, but they're the type of leaves that the water just runs off. They're difficult to actually wet, but nonetheless there's an awful lot of water collected in the leaf joints and places like that that will be given a chance to sort of soak into the plant. And obviously when I take it out, I'll turn it upside down and get that water out of those leaf joints. I don't want it left in there for any length of time, but for a short time it won't hurt. That's what would happen if it got rained on. Yeah, so, you know, as long as it dries off, it should be okay. And then we'll go from there. A little bit more information. If these yellow marks are due to chlorosis, also due to nutrient deficiencies possibly related to an incorrect pH, if all that lot is sort of true, probably well over half of the things I've been reading say that if the leaves aren't too badly affected, they should green up again. If they're too far gone, they will die. Yeah? And there's two schools of thought there, basically. So with me, it's going to have to be a wait and see. I mean, at the end of the day, the top of the plant doesn't look too bad. So if the people that say if the leaves aren't too bad, they should green up again, given corrective measures, then the top of the plant should recover okay, maybe. Some of the really bad leaves, often with chlorosis, it then turns... it effectively breaks the cells down, and the parts of the leaves die, if not the whole leaf. So it'll just go brown and crispy, basically, and either get cut off or drop off. But that is longer term. At the moment, I'm interested in trying to correct what is a problem, and why it's only on that one Vanda and not on the other two. I've done a bit of work on that too. And where chlorosis occurs, it depends on the vigour of the plant, its metabolism, you know, the rate at which everything moves around the plant. And a row of plants, 100 metres long, all fed and watered the same, could have half a dozen that are affected and all the others are fine. Because some just take a long time to show it, and others show it quite quickly. So that could be an explanation as to why one's affected and the other two don't seem to be at the moment. Could be just because of the lower temperatures, they're growing slower. You have to bear in mind, if this particular Vanda, which is quite a complex hybrid, is much more cool tolerant and grows quite well in lower temperatures, then this one would be more actively growing than perhaps the other two. These are questions rather than statements, if you see what I mean. This is called thinking out loud. If I'd thought out loud a lot earlier, maybe I could have stopped the problem happening in the first place. But it's happened now, and this is what I'm doing. It may work, it may not. Only time will tell. Okay then, chlorosis. It can be a nitrogen deficiency, and you can get a nitrogen deficiency by not having enough calcium in there as well, because the calcium makes the nitrogen work. Nitrogen metabolism, yeah? So overdosing on nitrogen without the backup of the calcium isn't going to work. You have to bear in mind as well that with incorrect or inappropriate pH levels, some of these elements get locked out. So they may be there, but the plant's not getting them. Yeah? So all these things are factors. These are not answers. These are just things as I've gone along and done a bit of digging. As I said, I think the problem with the missing sulfur can be excluded and disregarded totally, forget I ever said it, on the grounds that the element used in that fertiliser, the MSU one that I've got, do contain sulfates. So the sulphur is in there, but it's indirect, so it's not listed as a separate item because it wasn't added that way. Yeah, so that explains that anyway. But in the main, most places that I've read put chlorosis down to an iron deficiency, and iron deficiency can occur, one, because it's not there, obvious, and two, because you have an alkaline environment where iron just doesn't work properly. It obviously works a lot better if it's chelated, which it is in the CalMag. Yeah, so I'm pretty confident now the Vanda has got iron today. Whether the magnesium got in there or not, I'm not so sure. But at the end of the day, as long as it's there, it helps the iron work, iron utilisation. So again, if you've just got iron on its own without some magnesium, it's probably not going to work properly. So all these combinations of things can get very complicated. But to simplify it, to sum up, what I did was I checked the pH in the Vanda bucket. Far too high. Yeah? And given that it's been high like that since I changed the water, because that's, you know, the bucket remained static for a while in between water changes, and possibly before that and before that and before that, the pH has been far too high. And you have to bear in mind that some plants will be affected by deficiencies a lot quicker than others. Yeah, and it depends on their metabolism inside the plant, whether they're growing fast, whether they've got lots of light or not very much. So that different plants can be affected at different rates, which may explain why one's got a problem and the others that go in that bucket at the moment haven't. Yeah. However, magnesium deficiency can show up as a purple tinge, and my nocturnum, the latest growth, has some purple coloration on it, and I immediately lowered the light level. You know, my light level, my day lengths are getting longer and the sun's getting stronger. The light levels are going up in the grow room. So I thought, right, well, purple tinges, certainly on Cattleyas, in the main, it's getting a bit up near the top side of its light tolerance, and it produces that coloration basically to reflect the light. Yeah, and you know, it has a less dramatic effect with that coloration. But it can also be a deficiency. So it's difficult to diagnose all these things. I was going to say it's all good fun, but it's not really. It's a flipping headache. Not that I've got one yet, but I can feel one coming on. So in summing up, the treatment that's been done, I took the TDS level in the bucket as it stood, irrespective. That was just to give me a start point, and I checked the pH. So we started off with a TDS of, I've forgotten, about 190 I think it was, and that's just the MSU fertiliser in there at that point, and the pH was around 6.7, 6.8 according to my meter, which I'm not totally trusting it, but it's giving sensible readings. Now I'm using it sensibly and giving it something to work with, basically. So then what I did was I added the CalMag, which has got the chelated iron in it. Yeah, that gets some iron in there. The magnesium was already in the feed, and there isn't any in the CalMag. Well, sorry, there is some in the CalMag. Well, I'm more coffee, nurse, help. Need a holiday, and all that stuff. Yeah, it's called talking bollocks. Yes, so basically the iron and the magnesium, unfortunately, along with the calcium, which may or may not have had a shortfall, but they're in there, and I then added the citric acid to get that pH down to 5.9, which is the lower end that I would be prepared to go to. 5.8 is my bottom line. I know the range says 5.5 to 6.5, but given that the pH scale is logarithmic, based on a logarithm, each point on that scale is dramatic. You know, when you take a pH of 7 and then you go to pH 6, that's 10 times stronger. 10 times more acidic, and when you get down to 5 it's 100 times more acidic because of the way the scale works. So I don't like taking it too low. You know, these don't grow in, you know, peat bogs in the main. Some of our English ones do. Yeah, so the plant has been treated, and now everything else that has been dunked in that bucket for some considerable time through the winter is going in there as well, with it as it stands, to try and get things back on scratch. And even though some plants are showing no signs of this particular problem, it doesn't mean to say they haven't got it, and it's lurking there, slowly building up, waiting to turn some leaves yellow or get some yellow marks on the leaves. The typical marks for chlorosis are that the main sections of the leaf go yellow, but the veins stay green. But if you look at the construction of most orchid leaves, they don't tend to have lots of little veins like the very fine leaves, say on like maple leaves on a tree or something like that. You know, if you look at cattleyas, they've got a main vein down the middle of the leaf. Well, if all the rest of the leaf turns yellow and that stays green, you've got chlorosis basically. But on some plants it's difficult. So that's what I've done, and what's in that bucket now will remain there for a while. I daren't leave it too long because I don't know what's going to happen by mixing the CalMag with the MSU fertiliser. Some of those component parts could start making changes in the makeup in that bucket, and some things may combine with others. Some things could be lost, some things could, you know, change. So I don't want to leave it like that too long, but certainly for the next couple of days everything's going to get a dunk in that bucket with its makeup as it is now, and we'll see what happens. I don't suspect I will see major changes on that Vanda for some considerable time, but from now on my watering will be using my pH meter, because even though I've got a lot of plants that don't seem to be showing any signs, it's winter time and they're not growing much. Well, when they start growing faster, maybe things will show up because they've been building up slowly but surely in the winter. So yeah, that's what I've done. I'll do an update now and again to see how the plant's doing, see if it visibly changes. Whether it stops getting any worse, where some of the yellow marks may go back green. That's debatable, because some things I've read say no, once you've got chlorosis, that's it, those yellow bits stay there forever, unless the leaf goes brown and dies. Other places say that it, you know, it can correct itself. We'll wait and see. Yeah. So that's what I did. It was the first video was how I sort of looked into the problem. The second video is this one, what I've done about it, and a third video will follow in a while to see how it's gone, to see whether it worked, see if it made any difference at all, see if I got this headache for absolutely no reason. See you next time. And here's an afterthought, food for thought. Food being a word of importance. I've said that all three of my Vandas have been treated the same. That's a fact. They have all been treated the same, but they weren't all the same, were they? Have a look back through my everything in bloom on the 8th for the last 3 months. This one was in bloom right throughout the winter period. The other two weren't. And as we know, as I've said before, I've seen it, witnessed it, so it's a fact, Vanda blooms grow. So they open at a certain size and they continue to get larger. Now I'm still on the fence on the subject about, we all know that for an orchid to produce a spike, push it on, form the buds, swell them and open those blooms, it's going to use resources to do that. Whether it needs resources at that rate to maintain those blooms once they're open, I'm on the fence. But I can virtually guarantee with Vandas, they're going to be using resources because the blooms grow. So this one was different. And that may be the reason why this one has suffered and the other two didn't. Food for thought. All good fun, isn't it? It's very difficult to make a diagnosis on anything if you haven't got all the facts. I get a lot of people send me problems with plants and I can't even see them, let alone where they grow them and how they've been treated. It's difficult. But you know, when it's your own plant, you should have all the facts. You know what you've fed it on, you know how you've watered it and how often, you know what your environment's like. And that's the subtle difference, and it's not that subtle. That plant's been in bloom for about 3 months, right throughout the winter. The spike didn't come off that long ago. So this one was different. Maybe that's what's caused the problem.